Friends, have you ever wondered what keeps us alive? When all hope seems lost, when death surrounds us from every side, what is that inner strength that refuses to give up? Today I'm going to tell you such a story, not from a movie, but a real-life incident. This is the story of Ayesha, a girl who set out to chase her dreams, unaware that nature had a test prepared for her, a test she could never have imagined. This is a tale of pain, perseverance, courage, and ultimately victory. A story of 91 days of survival on the burning sands of the Thar Desert. So fasten your seatbelts, because after hearing this story, you'll be compelled to look at life from a whole new perspective. The date was May 15, 2018. Ayesha, 28 years old, was a well-known travel blogger and photographer from Delhi. She set off in her Jeep for Rajasthan's Thar Desert, with a dream to capture untouched corners of the desert, places the world had never seen before. She was thrilled, her eyes filled with dreams and her heart full of excitement. About 150 kilometers from Jaisalmer, while driving along a deserted road, her Jeep suddenly came to a halt with a jolt. She tried several times to restart it, but the vehicle wouldn't budge. All around her, there were only sand dunes stretching for miles. Her mobile had no network. At first, Ayesha thought perhaps another vehicle would pass by, but hours went by, and not a soul was in sight. As the sun began to scorch the earth and she was left with just 2 bottles of water, she made a decision. Instead of waiting in the Jeep, she would walk to find help. That decision turned out to be her first and biggest mistake. She had no idea she was walking into the heart of the desert, a place nearly impossible to return from. Just the first day of walking left her exhausted. The heat of the desert is unlike anything we feel in the cities. It feels as if the sky is raining fire and the ground is a burning pan. Her throat was parched. 1 bottle of water was already gone, and the second was half empty. As night fell, the cold began to bite. Fire during the day and ice at night. That's the truth of the desert. By the next morning, her lips were cracked and her vision started to blur. For the first time, she realized how deep a trouble she was in. Fear of death began to grip her heart. She collapsed on the sand, thinking it was all over. Images of her family began to flash before her eyes. She wanted to cry, but her body didn't have enough water left to produce tears. That was her first true encounter with death, staring her right in the face. But just when a person thinks it's all over, nature gives a small sign. Ayesha was nearly unconscious when she saw some rocks in the distance. Summoning every bit of strength she had left, she crawled toward them. The shade of those rocks felt like heaven to her in that moment. The next morning, when she opened her eyes, she noticed that due to the overnight moisture, dewdrops had formed on the leaves of some wild bushes nearby. She gently brushed her scarf over the leaves and squeezed a few drops onto her dry, cracked lips. Those weren't just drops of water. They were drops of life. In that very moment, Ayesha realized that crying wouldn't help her survive. If she wanted to live, she would have to fight. She would have to learn the rules of the desert. She took out a small diary from her backpack and wrote, "Day 3, I'm still alive." That wasn't just a line. It was a promise she made to herself. Ayesha was no longer a tourist. She had become a survivor. She began trying to recall what she had learned in school and from survival videos she had seen online. She remembered that you could use a camera lens to focus sunlight and start a fire. After hours of effort, a thin line of smoke rose from the dry grass, and finally, a small flame came to life. That fire didn't just give her warmth, it gave her hope. She learned to walk only during the early morning and late evening hours, and to rest in the shade during the scorching afternoon heat. With nothing to eat, she resorted to what most of us couldn't even imagine. She began roasting and eating insects, grasshoppers, and anything else she thought might be edible. Every bite felt like poison, but to silence the fire in her stomach, it was necessary. Her beautiful face had become sunburnt and blistered, her body covered in wounds, and her weight was dropping rapidly. She was no longer the same Ayesha who had left Delhi. But in the desert, hunger and thirst aren't your biggest enemies, it's loneliness. Days passed, then weeks, and Ayesha hadn't heard a single human voice. All around her was a terrifying silence that screamed into her ears. She had started talking to herself, sometimes to her mother, sometimes to her father. She would argue with them in the air, complain, and then break down crying. At times, she imagined someone was calling her name, but there was no one around. This kind of loneliness eats a person from the inside out. One day, she wrote in her diary, "Day 30, I don't know if I'm going insane or just trying to stay alive. The silence here is louder than a bullet. Is someone out there looking for me? Or has everyone already assumed I'm dead?" This question haunted her every second. Her body was still fighting, but now, even her mind was beginning to give up. Around the 45th day, using what little strength she had left, Ayesha climbed to the top of a sand dune. From a distance, she saw something shiny. She thought it might be the reflection of a car's windshield, or maybe a rooftop from a nearby village. A new surge of hope ran through her. She began running toward it like a madwoman, falling, rising, and running again. After hours of struggling toward it, She finally got close, only for her heart to shatter. It wasn't a car, it wasn't a village. It was a mirage, one of the desert's cruelest illusions that torments the thirsty even more. In that moment, Aisha broke down completely. Every ounce of her strength gave out. She collapsed onto the burning sand and sobbed uncontrollably. For the first time, she cried out to God, "Please no more. Take me now. I'm exhausted." That day was the lowest point of her 91-day struggle, because the death of hope hurts more than death itself. She lay unconscious for several hours in that broken state. In her fainted state, she saw her mother's face. She remembered something her mother once told her: "You only lose when you stop trying." Those words echoed in her ears. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was setting. Something deep inside her whispered, "I can't die. I won't give up. I promised my mother that one day I would do something great. I cannot die in obscurity like this." That one moment changed everything. The broken girl inside her died and a warrior was born. She decided she would no longer wait for help. She would help herself. She would keep walking in one direction until she either found her way out or met death. That night, she wrote in her diary, "Day 50. Today I've been reborn. This is no longer a fight just to survive. Now it's a fight to win." Around the 70th day, the weather turned terrifying. A massive sandstorm swept across the desert. The sky turned yellow, and the wind blew so fiercely that Aisha had to cling tightly to a rock to avoid being blown away. The storm raged for hours. She thought it might be her last day. Sand filled her mouth, nose, ears, every part of her body. But when the storm finally passed, a miracle occurred. The wind had blown away the top layer of sand, and between the rocks, a small pit had formed where some water had collected. The water was dirty, but for Aisha, it was nectar. She drank as much as she could. It was nature's strange game. The very desert that had pushed her to the brink of death had, through a storm, given her one more chance to live. That little pool of water kept her alive for the next few weeks. She had come to understand that nature could be just as merciful as it was cruel. 90 days had passed. Aisha had become nothing more than a walking skeleton. Her clothes were in tatters, and there was hardly any flesh left on her body. She was alive solely because of her willpower. One morning, as she moved forward, she looked down at the ground and couldn't believe her eyes. There, imprinted in the sand, were fresh camel footprints. This was no illusion. It was real. It meant someone, a human, had recently passed through that area. For the first time in 90 days, she had seen a sign of civilization. Tears streamed down her face. But these tears weren't of pain or sorrow. They were tears of joy, of hope. She used every last bit of strength she had to follow those footprints. She had no idea where they would lead, but they were her final hope. She kept walking, kept going, until she finally collapsed from exhaustion. On the morning of the 91st day, a group of nomads traveling with a caravan of camels spotted something strange lying in the sand. As they came closer, they were stunned. It was the body of a woman, barely breathing. They quickly gave her water, picked her up, and rushed her to a hospital in a nearby town. When Aisha opened her eyes, she was lying on a bed, surrounded by white walls and a ceiling fan spinning above her. She couldn't believe it. She asked a nurse what the date was. The nurse replied, "August 14th, 2018. And Aisha broke down in tears. 91 days. She had fought death for 91 days. And today, she had won. When she finally returned home, she was a changed person. In an interview, she said, "Those 91 days taught me the real value of the things we waste every day. A glass of clean water, a piece of bread, the sound of your family's voice. These are the most precious things in the world. I went to the desert to capture a few photos, but the desert showed me the biggest picture of life.